When Clair Obscur Expedition 33 was revealed during the 2024 Xbox Game Showcase, it took a lot of people by surprise. It was very stylish, showcasing interactive combat, fantastic visuals and dynamic menu systems, and memorable music. And the cherry on the top? It was a turn-based role-playing game being shown off on one of gaming's biggest stages. Due to the quality of what was shown, the assumption was that Expedition 33 was being produced by a big team with a big budget. To the contrary, the developers, Sandfall Interactive, are a very small and passionate team. Many are working on their first ever game, and their budget is not big. What has fueled the team is their passion for role-playing games and their desire to make their mark on the genre they love. Now, I know that we very often talk about Final Fantasy on this channel, and outside of a handful of reviews of the biggest games that have released from that franchise over the last 8 to 9 years, I seldom offer my opinion. But it felt like the right time to make an exception, as this game is special on so many levels. Throughout this review, which will be conducted in our typical granular style, we will therefore explore in great detail why I believe Expedition 33 is a game that's well worthy of your attention, especially as fans of Final Fantasy. Emphasis will be placed on gameplay, story and wider narrative intricacies, structure, presentation, and of course, lasting appeal. Now, due to the sheer volume of content featured throughout, timestamps have been provided to help you navigate between the various sections at your leisure. It should also be noted that despite its length, this review will be as spoiler-free as possible. But for those of you who have not watched one of our reviews before, this is what that means from our perspective. We will not be discussing any crucial story events in detail. Anything we do discuss around the story will be towards the latter half of the review, and it will be kept ambiguous so as to allow everyone to enjoy it on their own terms. After all, the developers have worked very hard on this product, and we want to ensure their creativity is respected. We will also not be showing any footage that we have captured while playing the game ourselves. Everything you see in the video will be public domain footage released via trailers. If you're still worried though, we'd recommend 2 courses of action. 1. Listen to the video without watching any of the visuals, or 2. Come back later once you've played the game yourselves to see if your thoughts align with ours. For transparency, it should also be noted that a free copy of the game was provided for the purposes of review, and we played primarily on Expeditioner difficulty, while also dabbling with Expert for a few hours. Alright, with that out of the way, let's begin the expedition. Expedition 33 has its roots in the conditional turn-based battle systems that were popularized throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. There's a set turn order that is visible to the player at all times, and once a character has their turn, they can take a few basic actions. But where the gameplay shines is when it blends those expected elements from a turn-based battle system with real-time elements that are much more modern in their nature. The influences themselves are clear, and the developers have not shied away from this. Michel Nora, the lead game designer, lists Elden Ring as one of his favourite games, and the director, Guillaume Broche, has Demon's Souls amongst his. Thomas Frappard, another game designer, lists Final Fantasy VIII, one of the few Final Fantasy games from the Golden Generation to incorporate real-time elements into its gameplay. It should therefore come as no surprise that this new combat system has both offensive and defensive connotations that lean into the real time, and perhaps the most obvious manifestation is seen through skills. Every character can equip up to 6 skills at any given time, but there are a plethora available to learn via individualized skill trees. When used, skills lean into the real-time aspect through single-button QTEs that appear amongst the chaos on screen. Should perfect timing be achieved, the skill is then maximized, but sometimes there can be negative consequences for failing QTEs. On the surface, that doesn't sound all that revolutionary. There are many games who have featured QTEs before during the battle scene, but where Expedition 33 differs is that each skill has unique QTEs. Some have 1 button press required, while some have 3. There are also differing speeds, with some QTEs going clockwise and others going counterclockwise. It means to execute actions as intended, players will need to familiarize themselves with specific skills and then practice. To use skills, characters also need to consume AP, and this is a resource that determines the ebb and flow of combat. AP itself can be acquired through a few different means, 2 of which are landing basic attacks or simply having a turn. But that's where the defensive side of the combat system comes into play, and this is where Expedition 33 separates itself from its peers. Each character has the ability to either dodge or parry in real time. If successful, both mechanics allow the target character to avoid damage altogether. But parries, which have a much narrower timing window, allow for evasion, the acquisition of AP, but also the deliverance of a counterattack. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely you just parry everything then? Well, that's where the game plays around with you. Towards the beginning of the experience, enemies will use a handful of single hit abilities with generous cues, and once you start learning timing points and landing parries, you'll feel very accomplished. But it doesn't take long for enemies to start using multiple abilities and multi-hit combos. And the developers have been very crafty when it comes to obscuring the actual point of impact. There are often cues though, you just have to watch and listen for them. That then introduces the other nuance. For a parry counter to actually execute, every single hit in the multi-hit combo needs to be parried, not just 1 or 2. And as the game progresses, this becomes harder and harder. That's where the game really shines though. To stand the best chance of success on anything beyond story difficulty, players will need to become very familiar with these systems, as while dodging and parrying is not mandatory for success, it will make life much easier. And that notion only becomes even more pronounced once the game starts introducing enemy abilities that cannot be parried or dodged through these 2 basic methods, but instead need to use more advanced methods. It keeps everything feeling fresh as the game develops, as not only is there a very strong roster of unique enemies and abilities, but the player is given a very purposeful toolkit to deal with what's being thrown at them. And as this is very much a skill-based game, the gauntlet is always thrown down should you lose. Because even though, yes, you could grind to make your party stronger and therefore reduce the challenge, deep down there's going to be a subset of players that know that they could just beat the obstacle before them if they just got good and improved their defensive play. What's great about these various mechanics is that they all work together in a symbiotic relationship. Skills require AP to use, but characters only get 1 AP per turn, with landing attacks delivering 1 additional AP. It's therefore important to get accustomed to parrying and parrying often, because this becomes a supplemental and very effective way of accruing more AP, which then unlocks access to some of the game's more powerful skills. Each of these elements, including AP acquisition, can then be enhanced through the use of pictos. Every character can boost their basic combat performance by how they assign attributes, but 2 other important factors are pictos and weapons. Pictos influence characters in 2 distinct ways. They can boost specific attributes, pushing them well beyond the base levels associated with character progression, but they can also provide utility, altering how a character operates in the battle scene. For example, they can ensure a character always has the first turn, grant shell when a specific scenario occurs, or even offer an automatic reprieve should a character fall in combat. The balance then comes from each character only being able to equip 3 pictos at any given time. But, and this is a big but, a pictos' ability can be learnt after winning 4 battles when equipped. Once learned, every other party member then gains access to that utility without having to equip that specific pictos, and they can then do this by assigning Lumina points. This then creates a system that is both individualistic and team-based. Equipped pictos have no Lumina cost, but they can also boost attributes. However, each pictos can only be assigned to 1 character at a time. This then creates a puzzle that needs to be solved around party setup. And with over 50 unique Pictos featured in the game, each of which can be upgraded, there will be many different ways to solve that puzzle. There to complement this system are weapons. Every weapon has specific elemental and attribute affinities, and they can be used to amplify damage output. But weapons also come with unique traits that lean towards certain playstyles. And this, combined with affinities, requires players to explore new possibilities if they want to succeed and maximize their damage output. Expedition 33 then introduces embellishments to help its gameplay further stand out. First, there's free aim. This breaks out from the rigid confines of typical turn-based battle systems, allowing players to use their aiming skills to shoot at specific targets, taking advantage of physical weaknesses. But the mechanic also serves as a nice counterbalance. Each free aim shot consumes 1 AP as opposed to restoring it, and players can even miss if they just aim badly, wasting AP. Characters themselves each have very unique mechanics. Gustav, for example, has everything based around his unique overcharge mechanic. Each action Gustav takes in combat charges his overcharge gauge, something that is inherently linked with his character's lore. When it's at its maximum, Gustav can then use a skill to deal incredible amounts of lightning elemental damage. Maël, Lune, and Ciel each have mechanics that are then equally creative. As a duelist, Maël embodies the gambit they face when staring down their enemies. She's able to switch between stances that either increase or decrease damage dealt, but this also affects how much damage she receives. It's then down to the player to determine the right time to switch depending on what's happening. Lune, as the resident mage, is able to cast very powerful spells, and doing so creates elemental strains. These strains can then empower subsequent spells, and this transforms Lune from being a typical turn-by-turn mage that's reacting to what's happening or just following a simple one-dimensional strategy, to one that's able to utilize compound damage by planning effectively and enhancing subsequent spells by using the strains. Ciel then offers a very creative take on the quintessential Dark Knight. By using Foretell, she needs to choose between skills that are aligned with the sun and the moon, and players then need to maintain a balance to maximize her effectiveness when she enters her Twilight phase. These unique character mechanics then combine with the Pictos and weapon systems in an incredible way. There will be a moment when you're convinced that you've found the optimum setup between the three elements that allows you to break the game. But someone else could have the exact same experience using a completely different character with a completely different setup. And that is pretty magical. Other elements are then pulled in and fused into the genre to enhance the experience further. Parrying and dodging is, for example, quite common in a specific subgenre of role-playing games often associated with the Souls franchise, but other elements have been brought forward from that specific subgenre. Expedition 33, for example, does not feature random battles. Enemies roam around the field and can be evaded. However, when players rest at specific markers, enemies that have been defeated will respawn. When playing on Expert, the difficulty also ramps up in quite severe fashion, as does venturing into New Game Plus. Parrying and dodge mechanics are no longer a nice to have. If you miss 1 or 2, you're dead. And to make matters worse, the timing windows are also narrowed even further. When all of this combines, you have a game in Expedition 33 that seems simple on the surface, but is actually very deep and engaging. It's an incredible reactive turn-based battle system, and it's going to be fascinating to see the approaches people take, especially when it comes to flat-out breaking the mechanics and pasting through everything on Expert difficulty on New Game Plus. You will constantly face enemies that pose new challenges, either through devilish multi-hit combinations, elemental resistances, or the horrible use of debuffs. Fortunately, players can take advantage of a combination of free aim, weapon perks, skills, Pictos, buffs, debuffs, break gauges, and specific character mechanics to solve those problems. The only downside, if it could be considered as such, is that there is so much packed into the game. With 4 types of evasion, unique QTE timing points for many different skills, and so many different enemy types, each with their own skill chains, it can become a little overwhelming. And that's before even getting into the solutions, which will revolve around combining weapons with attribute selection to maximize damage amplification, and then picking the right Pictos and then assigning learnt Pictos through Lumina. The good thing is that on a typical expedition difficulty playthrough, you won't have to worry too much about min-maxing. You can just enjoy the combat system for what it is, one that's both challenging, engaging, and innovative. The narrative premise of Expedition 33 is very similar. It's very simple on the surface, but becomes very deep and engaging as the experience progresses. After being separated from the mainland by an event known as the Fracture, residents of Lumiere face a future that is being defined for them. Every year, a being known as the Paintress reveals a descending number on the monolith. And every year, the people whose age matches that number are destined to perish in an instant, fading away before their loved ones in an event known as the Gommage. For 67 years, these citizens of Lumiere have come to embrace their fate. But there are those who seek to end the cycle, those known as expeditioners. They have one goal: to leave Lumiere, visit the mainland, and kill the Paintress so that no more have to die. A group known as Expedition 33 are the focus of this story. They are attempting to succeed where so many previous expeditions have failed. But, as they push forward, what the expedition finds ends up being unexpected. They are able to enjoy the beauties of a world that they never had the chance to know, encountering people, beings, and places that since the Fracture have become myths. But at each turn, these wonders are juxtaposed with life-threatening encounters against Nevrons, beings created by the Paintress that seek to defend her and thwart the expedition at every turn. Everything you experience is through the eyes of the expedition, and the dynamic that exists within the group works well due to the various archetypes that feature. Each member has very clear and defined character traits. Some try to be pragmatic, focusing on protocol, while others try to take a much more sobering view of their situation and the chance of success. The definition of success also changes from character to character and over time. And as you might expect, as the narrative progresses, twists and turns are introduced that help to muddy the waters further, pushing characters to explore emotions in ways they had not been accustomed to. To aid with this development, Expedition 33 features plenty of well-written and directed story sequences that happen while the party is exploring what can be considered the core narrative path. But additional exposition can be revealed through smaller, optional interactions, and by what happens when the party sets up camp. Once the party ventures out into the world, they are able to camp whenever they want. It's here that they can take stock of everything that has happened thus far, while also listening to vinyls they've collected on their travels, and upgrade weapons and consumables. But it's also where specific bonding takes place between the different members of the expedition. Every character has purposeful scenes, and the relationship develops as more and more are watched. This then has a direct impact on gameplay, as by increasing relationship level, players are able to make use of very powerful gradient attacks. The great thing about this though is that players are trusted to explore at their own pace and in the direction that they want. There is, of course, a core path that needs to be taken in order to progress the narrative, but as the game develops and the world starts to grow larger and larger, less trodden paths begin to open up. Small side quests become available, and optional areas will appear. These can relate to secret bosses that can be hidden at the end of obscured trails, which can sometimes offer a much stiffer challenge than some of the mandatory bosses in their respective areas. But there are also small quests that help to add some colour. It's a game that rewards exploration. Just as you don't need to venture into an optional area or help an NPC to find something they've lost, you don't need to speak to your allies during camp. The game presents options and expects the player to make their own choices. Just like classic role-playing games from the period that served as a clear inspiration, Expedition 33 is therefore not a game that holds your hand. The only pin you will ever see on the map points you to the main objective, and that's it. There's no fancy quest log that tells you exactly what you need to do or where you need to go. If you want to delve deeper, it's on you as the player to want to expose yourself to the world, to learn about it, remember what you've seen, and use that knowledge to solve its riddles. And this will delight some, while probably frustrating others. But whether you choose to further immerse yourself or not, the overarching narrative is strong enough that those who do stick to the core path only will still be satisfied. Guillaume Broche and Jennifer Svenberg-Yen, who collectively came up with the concept, had a very clear vision for the story they wanted to tell, one that tackles the concepts of grief and the tough choices families need to make. Within the game's opening hours, those themes are laid bare, but the exploration of these themes doesn't end there. As the expedition progresses, its members are forced to explore their feelings around these topics. That relates to the paintress and what she represents, but it also relates to each member of the expedition. They all had reasons for wanting to volunteer to go on what many perceive to be a suicide mission. They could have stayed at home to live out the final year of their lives, but they chose another path. And the reasons why are important, impactful, and are rooted in those core themes. Just as the writers had a vision for their story focusing on grief and family, they also had a clear vision for using the world itself as a fascinating storytelling device. Not long after leaving Lumiere, the expedition ventures through an area called Spring Meadows. As they explore this lush and vibrant place, they get to see firsthand what happened to some of the expeditioners who had ventured forth many years prior and ultimately failed in their quest to defeat the paintress. You'll hear small lines of dialogue that help to ground everything in the past, while stumbling upon logs from previous expeditions that reveal how their journeys ended. But subtle aspects of lore are also even delivered by the game's resting points. Every single one has a number of a previous expedition blazoned on it, subtly hinting at how much progress they made. And as you delve deeper and visit many more areas, the importance of the wider mission is displayed in very real terms. It's masterful world building and visual storytelling. It just may not always seem so on first glance, and especially not on a first playthrough, but everything is purposeful, and there are so many details that are just hidden in plain sight. How everything then concludes feeds into those themes, and there are sure to be many debates as to what everything means. This is a story that just has so many layers. Conceptually, it's incredible with so many philosophical implications, and it lands the execution too. It's therefore going to be fascinating to see how Sandfall Interactive will attempt to build out the Clair Obscur property in the future, should they even choose to do so. Now, the gameplay and narrative pillars would not be anywhere near as effective as they are without presentation that matched. The interactions between the various characters, as you start to learn more about their backstories and motivations, typifies this. They are the ultimate combination of acting through both voice and motion capture, writing, audio mixing and sound design, and of course, visual fidelity. Despite the modest origins of the developers, they went big on voice talent. And it paid off. The characters are multifaceted beings, and the voice talent pulls no punches when it comes to highlighting their strengths and weaknesses through the art of performance. Each member of the expedition has their time to shine, moments where they are required to break free of their emotional restraints and deliver compelling monologues. When combined with some brilliant motion capture work, the performances of Charlie Cox, Jennifer English, Kirsty Ryder and Charla Nix add real weight to these moments, making you become invested in what's happening. Andy Serkis and Ben Starr also do a great job of exuding just the right amount of intrigue and emotion, making you really get invested in their characters and making you feel an array of emotions. Rich Keeble and Maxence Cozzola are then able to ground everything, providing a welcome dose of comedy and warmth through Monoko and Esquier, while also providing their own poignant moments. But ultimately, everyone's going to want to go for a swim. Story-based sequences are then complemented by some fantastic sound design. Everything that you see manifests through audio in just the right way. And the team, which was led by Maxence Playez, were very purposeful with how they used certain sounds as motifs, such as the cane. But it goes so much further than that. Even things that may be deemed quite simple are delivered in a way that is respectful to listeners, and one of the most prominent examples is movement. Many of the characters have running animations, and players will be exposed to loud, thudding footsteps and tired breathing as a consequence. But should they choose to play as Lune, for example, the audio experience will change. Lune still walks around, but instead of running, she floats. And when she does so, everything becomes so much more serene, with subtle gusts of wind floating past instead of those plodding thumps and heavy breathing. There are also plenty of other nuances, such as the sound that plays when an enemy notices you in the field, and it was a delight to just absorb all the tiny little details the team packed in to ensure every aspect had its moment to shine. The other standout with the game's audio is delivered via the soundtrack, and it's a journey that is just as remarkable as the end product itself. As was revealed during the pre-launch campaign, Laurent Testard posted a track on a random forum, and the director of the game stumbled upon it and reached out. Testard himself has studied video game music for years and seized the opportunity, creating a soundtrack that has clear themes associated with the major elements of battle, character, and environment. The team wanted music to be the thing that bound everything together, and this means motifs are ever present as the game progresses. These themes are then brought to life through Testard's music and orchestrations, and the vocals of Alice Dupont-Pessier. The result is something quite magical. The soundtrack lives and breathes. Character themes boom during pivotal moments, but they also seem to adapt. There are clear crescendos, but the music is also not afraid to disappear, with its absence used at just the right moment to let the acting shine. It's truly a stellar piece of work. The persistence and dedication displayed towards audio then extends through to the game's visuals. Beyond the storytelling aspect, the world itself is a treat on the eyes. Each new area has its own distinct visual identity, and it oozes creativity. The team very much lent into the notion of a world being an artist's canvas. This then becomes even more apparent once you gain access to the world map. It feels akin to a stylized diorama with exaggerated proportions that make everything feel cute and adorable. And as you gain access to new methods of traversal, the spectacle and wonder of the world only increases. This care and attention then extends through to the characters themselves, with so much focus placed around animation both in and out of combat. And it's incredible just how good everything looks, especially as very few of the sequences are pre-rendered, something shown by any custom outfit or hair choices being present in those sequences. But in-game combat is perhaps where things excel the most. Skills look absolutely incredible in terms of how they're executed, and the various ranks of enemies and bosses feel fresh and original, never tiring. That then links in with one of the game's strengths. Expedition 33 is a 20 to 30 hour game on a regular playthrough. It's short, sharp, and doesn't overstay its welcome. There is no padding. If it hadn't already been clear, everything feels purposeful. But for those who want to delve deeper and truly invest in the world, there's plenty to keep them occupied. And this can be experienced either through the end of a regular playthrough or via New Game Plus. In traditional format, this means that as the final dungeon looms, the world opens up. Players can navigate the world and find challenges they're strong enough to undertake and gain access to supplemental lore. They can also continue to seek out collectibles in the form of logs from previous expeditions and vinyls that can be listened to at camp. Should New Game Plus then be chosen, players need to be ready. It pulls no punches. Enemies offer a serious upgrade in terms of the challenge offered, but New Game Plus also offers exclusive rewards and loot, with weapons able to go beyond their regular confines and pictos also being upgraded further. The developers state that for those who want to experience everything the game has to offer, then they should be willing to invest another 20 to 30 hours. And for the price point, that's a very solid proposition. It means Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a game that does not merely pay homage to the great role-playing games that came into existence throughout the PlayStation era and beyond. Instead, it stands very confidently alongside them as a worthy peer. The small team at Sandfall Interactive should be incredibly proud and satisfied with what they have created. And that's because this is a game that is sure to delight fans of the genre for many years to come. And if you've been yearning for a modernized, turn-based role-playing game that will stoke those nostalgic feelings while also proposing something new, this may well be the game you've been waiting for. In short, based on my wealth of knowledge and exposure to the Final Fantasy franchise, I thoroughly recommend Expedition 33. With that though, I hope you've enjoyed this extracurricular video. Normal service will resume shortly, so I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.